So without any further ado, we shall kick off. We've done the welcome parts and the introductions. Anna, I don't know whether or not you wanted to just quickly jump in.
Yeah, just a little bit of a background. Yes, I'm the physical activity project manager for Parkinson's UK. So as part of my role, I'm to provide and build and deliver opportunities for people with Parkinson's to be active, and also work with healthcare professionals and people like Colin and so forth to kind of deliver things like this. It's all around awareness to help people integrate people with Parkinson's into the sessions or to set up specific sessions. And we've had this partnership going for a little while now. We're taking it to the next level. We've done a fair bit of awareness around what the condition is, and now we really want to get that delivery going.
Thanks, Anna. This is continuing on your slide, if that's all right.
Yeah. So for those that don't know, Parkinson's is the fastest growing neurological condition. There currently isn't a cure. It is degenerative. So it will mean that it's one of those that gets worse over time. Anyone can get Parkinson's, young or old. The general or the average age of diagnosis is around about 60, but there are people as young as 19 that have been diagnosed. There's around about 145,000 people diagnosed in the country already. So that's kind of the same as around about 18,000 people per year. So every hour, 2 more people are diagnosed, and 1 in 37 people in the UK are living with this will be diagnosed. Most people are diagnosed later on, as mentioned, but it can be much earlier, and the diagnosis process can be quite long for some people.
Thanks, Anna. And in respect of why table tennis, so we understand the condition. As Anna touched on there, this is part of a relationship we've got with Parkinson's UK, where we're working with table tennis as the catalyst to support activity. We have already done quite a piece of work on Parkinson's table tennis, and some of you may have read our People with Parkinson's Partnerships Review, where it details some of the work and some of the ground that we've made in this space. And this is about the sort of next step in terms of growing opportunities and programs across our club network and group network to provide more opportunities for play with Parkinson's. So we know that table tennis is a great therapy, as is exercise for people with Parkinson's. Under the belief that table tennis not only aerobic but can provide and requires those fine motor skills, which would be really useful in terms of stimulating various parts of the brain. Table Tennis and Table Tennis England has a commitment to grow and retain participation among those living with a disability or long-term health condition, as is stated within our Level the Table strategy, which some of you would have read upon when it was released about a year ago now, just over a year ago. So very much aligns with our focus around supporting underrepresented audiences. And we know that table tennis and Parkinson's kind of dovetail together really quite nicely. So it's not necessarily about putting all of our eggs in every disability basket. We just know where it's more prominent and how we can have the most benefit, hence the partnership. So working together with Parkinson's UK, we aim to promote and enable more opportunities to engage in the sport. And for those who wish to do so, remain in the sport and feel comfortable to progress at their own pace. We want there to be a clear, I won't call it pathway, but we'll say pathway or route into the sport, but then also where they can see progression for themselves. There's various different opportunities and ways you can play table tennis, and we want everything to be open should people want to take that next step. So we're going to go straight into what we consider when we're building a session. So rather the background about the condition we've sort of squared off, but in terms of session considerations, this is what this webinar is all about. So we want to consider things like environment when we look at setting up sessions, be that in a club or group setting, avoiding echoey rooms and spaces. Providing enough tables to allow a rotation of players, but also adequate space to allow movement around. And it's also advisable that groups and clubs carry out risk assessments accordingly. Sorry, I took a break because I'm letting somebody else in. Also dedicated, quite often some people are either returning to activity or seeking activity as a means to support their Parkinson's. So an often really useful tactic within sessions and the environment consideration is around a meet and greet. As new players arrive on first visit, they understand where they need to go and a friendly face on welcome. During the session, appreciate that it's also advisable to take regular breaks should there need to be breaks for medication, etc. Details of how this session would usually work so that people can anticipate what it will involve and an outline of what it will involve and manage their engagement and participation accordingly. Communication is also a key factor, ensuring that each session is a checking in how people are going and plan accordingly. Anna, do you want to come a bit on the communication strand a bit?
Yeah. So especially on that first one with checking in, it can be as simple as kind of just lining people up. So right, if you feel really rubbish, stand at this side of the table. If you're feeling better, at this side. So it's just you get an idea about where people are and what they might be able to manage on that session. And it's just that way of people being able to kind of say how they're feeling and do that. Also with communication is, as we've mentioned in previous webinars, is that speech can be affected, or because there's a cognitive element as well, somebody may take time to process what they actually want to say. So don't step in and finish a person's sentence or presume that you know what they mean before they're finished, just because you know that's kind of taking away their independence and their communication, and also what you might be mean you may have interpreted completely wrong. So just try and say. So speech can be affected, hearing can be affected, and also projection of voice. So you can find that people are quite quiet. So therefore, if you are in echoey rooms, it might be quite difficult for people to hear. So just make sure that you position yourself in the way that you can be heard, and that you can hear other people as well. And you know, a good exercise for while you're doing things is trying to get people to project their voices, because it's working muscles that they need to do. Always check for understanding and use open-ended questions. So this is you checking in that the person understands what you've told them. Again, this is to do with the cognitive element to for people to understand. Sometimes if you give long-winded instructions, somebody may not understand that. So short and sharp, and then check in that they know that they know what you mean. And ask people for feedback as well. So after the session or after a little element of that, how was that for you? How did you find it? Was anything too much? Was anything too easy? So then you can get an idea of where a person is, but also what you may need to work on or what they like and don't like, so you can tailor a session around that as well.
Thanks, Anna. Yeah, and with regard, we touched on it right at the start in terms of that friendly face on arrival and welcoming audiences and so on, but crucial to any session, let alone welcoming players with Parkinson's, is knowing their audience and knowing who you're engaging. A lot of people might be attending for the first time, so understanding about what people do and don't do in their day-to-day life and what they like to do, acknowledge any barriers and which would support the planning of future sessions. Ask people what a typical day looks like, what's important to them, and enjoyable for them, could also help shape the content of a session. And goals and motivations are quite key, really, and quite obvious in terms of what people want out of a session, what people want to achieve. However small or large what those motivations might be, it's always important to structure sessions around that. Across the board, and not necessarily just with players with Parkinson's, but particularly important in this scenario. So in terms of activity itself, just beg your pardon, let somebody else in. In terms of table tennis activity itself, carefully plan and agree any new activity, ensure it's realistic, it motivates people, provides a sense of achievement, achievable goals and meaningful goals, crucially, that are realistic, and acknowledge that some players may take steps back depending on whether it's an on or an off day, a good or a bad day. People's circumstances can change and mindset can change over time. So understanding that progress isn't always forward moving, there could be some step back as well. Challenging the brain, as well as the sort of physical movement patterns, but changing maybe how to score the game, points are worth more, or use days of the week and different ways in which the brain could be engaged when playing. More and more physical activity isn't always the healthiest. At times some people may have too much to do. So a good balance is important. So importantly around that, taking breaks, and a lot of newcomer sessions, drop-in sessions, social sessions. We see various different opportunities for breaks and a cup of tea and things. And we've seen that in some sessions that we'll touch on in the panel discussion that prove really sort of beneficial to the audience. And as mentioned in the last slide, celebrating all achievements, group achievements, however small, and appreciating that small achievements and small steps can become big leaps over time. So yeah, worth acknowledging that small gains are really important, as well as being able to play that forehand or that backhand. So that's the session considerations, and just to touch on a little bit, the step principles, which if you're coaching, you might already be quite familiar with. So a nice simple way in terms of understanding if you've made adjustments is looking at the space, allowing space for the venue for any off the table activities should that be needed in terms of warm up or bat and ball familiarization. Ensure that space for accessing the courts in the first instance. On the table, play different ways, play across, particularly for newcomers or trying to get acquainted with the sport. Half table and maybe a funnel effect with stretch nets or whatever that might be. The task, as we've already touched on, kind of bite-sized elements of the task to start with, and building up to more comprehensive movement patterns, more intensity in terms of force, and using more space in terms of the table. Different ways in which we can familiarise ourselves with bats and balls and table tennis, like roll the ball, bounce and catch, different ways. I won't list everything that you can see on screen, and that's partly why we record it and you can see the slides afterwards. But yeah, understanding the task, the different types of equipment you can utilise, and we can link you in as the governing body with where to access these sorts of things. Got bigger balls, lighter balls, different colours, orange, white, etc. Strapping on bats, and considering that in terms of wrist and strapping to the bats. Bucket of balls close by so that participants aren't spending too much time picking up balls, which they may find difficult, but also detaches from actually being engaged in the sport, the enjoyment. Wheelchair and disability friendly tables are always useful and advisable in respect of, if you're in a wheelchair, then access is permitted and there's no risk of injury on legs or shins on the legs underneath. But also they can be much more stronger in terms of resting, and we've talked before about in beginner level sessions that opportunity to take a rest and to kind of steady yourself, and that could be a key consideration for sessions going forward. And people really understanding that there's perhaps a need for more volunteers, perhaps a need for more coach to player ratio, maybe use better players within a session to support the more weaker players, or the new players, should we say. Competition to match up players of similar ability is also really useful in terms of maintaining that retention and engagement in the sport. And we know sessions at present that are really successful, and they've recruited more and more volunteers that have specific roles around collecting balls and meet and greeter and those sorts of things we've already touched on. So the step principles as well is a really quick and useful way that you'll be familiar with if you already coach, but understanding the adaptations that can be made. So what we've tried to do there is set the scene and go through key session considerations. We've done a little bit of background around Parkinson's, but there are still webinar slides that you can reflect back on from the previous webinar should you want to know a little bit more about the condition. But we wanted to just kind of set the scene, and now we want to go into what came out of the last webinar was very much about opportunity to talk through, share ideas, ask questions. So we've pieced together a panel of myself, Anna, Jan Fuller, who's online at the minute, George Chan, who's online as well, has recently started a session, coaching a session at Harrogate's Rackets Club. And so we wanted to welcome members of the panel. Gary Lee is also a participant with regards to table tennis, and as taken part in the ping pong national champions back in August 2021. So this opportunity now is to talk through if anybody's got any questions based on the information we've just delivered, and just generally talk around question and answers. Should there be people on the call, hopefully people on the call that are looking at drawing down some funding to start their own session. So this is an open forum. And I would like to, it's always easy if someone gets the ball rolling and starts the open conversation. So I'm going to crack us on with a bit of a prompt with regards to Jan in the first instance. So the question I've got, Jan, hopefully people might be thinking the same, is getting back into table tennis. Well, actually, yeah, give us a bit of a breakdown of who you are and what you do in the first instance.
Hi, I'm Jan. I've always played table tennis all my life. I come from a sporty family. So I am a table tennis player that got Parkinson's. And I actually think that is quite important. There is a different perspective from people like myself that have always played table tennis, or table tennis players who then get Parkinson's, or people who have Parkinson's who go into table tennis as a means of having exercise, etc. I think you'll find that their attitudes and their objectives of what they want to achieve from any sessions you put on will be probably quite different. Myself, I had a break of 28 years of from table tennis. I've always played it, and when I did come back, I developed Parkinson's and I wanted to get into some exercise. But at the time, that was 8 years ago, there wasn't really anything like this. It wasn't anything specific for people with Parkinson's. So I went back into what I will call is the able-bodied world of table tennis, and it's a world I am still able to exist in. Which is nice, but what people are looking for, I think, is something you need to discover with them. What is it they want to achieve from the sessions they're coming to? Do they just want to come along for a bat and chat? The session I myself run once a month. I'm a qualified coach, but the people really come along for a bat and chat and a bit of ping pong. They're not really interested in me coaching them. Apart from correcting their grips, etc., every now and again as they're almost dropping the bats, but they really come along for a social bit. So is it that what they want, or do they actually want to learn to play table tennis, or get back into table tennis, or progress their table tennis? So I think finding out what the people who come along to you actually want to achieve from their session is probably very important.
Thanks, Jan. The question that we've got, and maybe prompt others to ask and the conversation to continue, is getting back into table tennis after a year, after some years out of the sport, and getting back into table tennis with Parkinson's. What stood out for you as standard ways of doing things from a table tennis perspective that perhaps didn't quite sit right with Parkinson's at that time?
Well, actually, what happened to me is finding a venue, finding a club to get back to was very difficult.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, finding venues is very difficult.
Yeah.
I actually went back to a club I used to belong to many years ago, and nobody there remembered me, and I was actually asked, because I believe I was a female actually, to come along for an assessment to see what level I was, to see if they would agree to me actually joining the club I used to belong to, which was a bit strange. But the ironic thing was that I actually walked into the club and there was a picture of me on the wall from 25 years earlier when I used to play down there. So that was quite funny, and I pointed that out.
That's your idea, was it, Jane?
It's what, sorry, Gary?
That's your idea, was it?
Yeah. Finding a venue and finding people who are willing to incorporate people with Parkinson's. I think people are frightened of what they don't know. So those were my main things, to say finding somewhere that would accept me. At the time, my Parkinson's wasn't as bad as it is now. So I actually needed to be of a certain standard before they'd accept me. So that was a barrier as well. But luckily enough, I got accepted into it. But I suppose people's attitudes, I think, in the last 8 years have changed a lot due to the work that everybody's done. I think it's probably easier now, and due to the inclusivity, etc., and the marketing of everything, people are a lot more aware of having people with disabilities, whatever you want to call it, or people with Parkinson's, and incorporating them. I think it is difficult if people have more advanced symptoms in Parkinson's to incorporate them into, again, able-bodied sessions, whatever you want to call them, because we do have special requirements. We do need very clutter-free areas. Trip hazards, you know, are a problem. Lots of balls all over the floor would be a problem. Going round things, myself, I often will have to stop. I can't go round things. And if people are coming towards me or there's chairs and things in the way, that's very difficult for me. So you need to make sure that the areas are very clear, and some of those, say, those things that you just don't think about for people that normally play, for us is very difficult.
Thanks, Jan. That's really useful, and yeah, just touches on, you know, the stuff from a real life perspective, what we've sort of mentioned there in terms of environment and etc. George, are you there? Can I bring you in to this conversation?
Yes, I can say my 2 pennies worth.
So, George, you currently coach at Harrogate's Racquets Club, a Parkinson-specific session that's been going well so far.
Yes,
we're going to touch on that in a bit more detail, sort of a few slides to go, but just wanted to understand from you as a coach, coaching a Parkinson-specific session, your thoughts or delivery methods that might have altered or adapted, or any kind of way in which you lead the session that might differ from an able-bodied session or non-Parkinson session, as it were.
Yeah, I think we start off with very gentle warm-up and just progressing to having big movements, exaggerating big movements, because for us, the big movements we think is big is very small. So we really sort of have to exaggerate the twisting, the touching, the bending, just to engage ourselves ready for the sport in hand. The sessions are not very technically in depth. It's an introduction into every aspect, like the serving, just basic principles, and you find that some will take to it quite well. Some will have a bit of coordination issues. So we sort of just concentrate on just achieving very small achievements, and the rewards are quite big in the end, because once they achieve it and it's doable, they think, oh, we can do it, and it's very good. What I do find is that I tend to keep the students around the same tables, because movement around the tables, like we do with the kids with top table and so on, causes a lot of headaches with movement around the court. So isolating them so grouping their ability at the very beginning is quite useful. When they come in and you know it's John or Peter or whoever, they can then be sort of grouped together in their abilities, so they can have an even rallies going. So that's something that I found was very good. Minimizing court movement has been quite useful, and keeping the sort of table tennis focus just to be one aspect or two aspects, and then just getting the rallies going. And the rallies really brings a smile onto the students' face, because and this is where the volunteers come in really handy, because they can return an awkward ball back and keep the balls going. And that's when they really sort of have a smile on their face and the sense of achievement. It's not sort of 2 shots and then pick up ball. It's like, oh, 5, we can go to 10. And then if something as silly as that, we can say 15 shots. And it's a real challenge, but its sense of achievement is absolutely tremendous. And that spurs them on to hopefully come back. And generally they have been coming back, which is quite nice. And then to end it all, we have teas and cake, which is always a winner.
Always really enjoyed it. Tea and cake.
Yes.
The main pull. Thanks, George. That's really useful, a good insight as well. And Gary, I know that you sort of try to keep your eye in and play on a once a week basis. And I wonder whether or not you'd be interested in just telling us what it is that helps you keep coming back and keep playing.
Well, I always liked the game really since I was young. I come back into work at Parkinson's. I like playing. I like anything playing. I can't play club. Does post-related courses at the moment. So I play active players really, which means people don't understand Parkinson's. And my alarm will go off for tablets, but people say, no, your alarm's going off tablets, for example. So I think basically, I think playing active players where you do like your skills, but to play Parkinson's-related players be a bonus for me because I don't play them normally. So,
yeah. Thanks, Gary. So at this point, I'll shut up a bit and open it up to people on the webinar that might want to ask Jan, Gary, or George a quick question on where they might be thinking about what they might be thinking about their session or any kind of lived experience.
Can I just test? Can anybody hear me?
yes.
We can hear you.
Oh, brilliant. I'm Suzanne Peng. I'm sorry I got in a bit late. I was trying to make the computer work.
Not a problem. Welcome. Do you have a question?
Rob does.
Oh, we've got hands up. It's probably useful. Yeah, go for it.
Oh,
Hi Gary, hi Jan, hi George.
Hi, Rob.
Yeah, I'm close to, I'm working with some other people to set up a group in Leeds, and we're close to that. And some of the things you said were useful about, I've been doing a questionnaire of where people are at. And one of the things was about how much coaching they wanted. And I can see that there'll be different levels, which is great. I want it to include people of different abilities. And one of the other things, we've gone for a community venue rather than a table tennis club. One of you said, I can't remember who, about people not, Jan, was it about more bat and chat than serious table tennis? Yeah. And that suits that kind of venue better, I think.
Yeah.
But I wanted to ask you whether you have very different people of very different abilities in your sessions. This is any of you, and if so, how do you best manage that?
Shall I go for that to start with?
Yeah.
Most of mine are beginners, if you like. I have had 1 or 2 players who have got Parkinson's that have come along. The answer is, unless you've got some helpers, it's very difficult to have a mixed class like that. Yeah. In fact, I was lucky that my dad comes along. He's also got Parkinson's, and then he helps me with my group. So what we had to do is I took for a while the more players and did a little bit of coaching with them, and Dad stayed and did a bit of the socializing and the bat and chatting with the others. I think you need hands to help you, is the answer to that, and you have to really sort of personalize what it is that they want to get out of it. But it's difficult if you're on your own running something like that, because the two just really don't go together. The other thing I'd just like to add is when you're actually talking to people and giving instructions to people with Parkinson's, we actually, I'll speak for myself, although we're all different. I have trouble with more than 2 or 3 questions or instructions at one time. My processes are less than they used to be. I used to look after 5,000 staff when I worked, and it was a piece of cake. But nowadays, if you ask me a question that's got 2 or 3 things in it, my brain will go blank. So you need to break things down to be quite simple, and just, if you're asking questions or giving instructions, make sure they're not on a run. You know, they're one at a time, and wait for the answer and allow us to process it. Everybody will be different. Personally, I struggle with that, and I say sometimes I go blank and I'll just look at you until I've processed it. But does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. That's a really good point, Jan. Thanks.
I can add a bit to that. We've got more able players. We're fortunate in the club that we can offer them to join the club and play in the sort of a session. We just started a beginners session, so for more able players, so they can then progress and then join in club sessions thereafter. But not everybody's got that sort of luxury of that venue of being a permanent setup ready for people. But we're in that lucky position.
I think the other thing is find numbers. Well, no, actually, numbers of people to play as well.
Sorry, Gary.
It's good to find numbers of people to play as well.
Yes.
You find George?
Yeah, you need not to have loads of people, you know, too many at any one time, don't you?
No, that's Jan, no, isn't it? Find people is difficult as well. They find people to play the first.
Yes, yeah.
Conscious of time, I know Dan and Jan, you've got your hands up in terms of questions, but I'm true to my word. So what we'll do is, if we could take your questions offline, pop them into the chat, and we'll get our expert panel to come back to you with an answer to those questions, because I'm sure we would like to now go into the facts of what the grant will involve and how we want to support some sessions. And I said right at the start we would be finished by 7:45, which inevitably we may not be, but let's give them the best chance. So thanks very much, panel. That was really useful. Thanks for the questions. And Jan and Dan, yeah, if you pop in the chat, and we'll endeavour to get back to you on those. So the grant, we're fortunate enough to, again, be working with Parkinson's UK, who have provided the funding for us to be able to distribute to our clubs and groups. The grant is for, but not limited to, Premier clubs, leagues, associated clubs, local national partners, community groups, Parkinson's UK groups. We are opening applications for between £250 to £500, and they are assessed on merit, and funding is awarded based on a panel approval. These are small grants, really small, as you can see, that are ideally for seed opportunity and starting that journey and trying new different interventions to provide these sessions. The round of grants will open tomorrow, not necessarily at the stroke of midnight, so please don't start applying then. They'll open tomorrow and then close on the 1st of March. So there's quite a healthy window to get applications through. It's an online application, and the QR code in the bottom corner there will take you directly to where that application is. Successful projects will utilise innovative ways to reach and engage, as we've discussed in this webinar. They will demonstrate some impact on the people that are attending and some sustainability. And we are asking that projects are started by the 1st of September. So again, a decent amount of time in regards to that planning aspect. We'll notify successful applicants by Friday the 10th of March. Our panel will meet on the 8th of March to finalise decisions, and all funded projects will be required to return an element of monitoring evaluation, which will be confirmed in an SLA and a service level agreement that we'll send, very aligned to how level the table funding, what we've provided in the past, quite light touch survey completion. We won't be asking for War and Peace in respect of M&E. I'm going to skim over this one in terms of time, but this will be on the slides. But this is basically the background and detail of George's session at Harrogate's Rackets Club. It's a real strong case study there in terms of things you might want to take out and include within your application. This will be on the slides, which will be on the webinar page on the Table Tennis England website for you to look at. What you need to be aware of is we, hopefully you know that Table Tennis England now have a cohort of area managers. The map is not completely accurate in the middle there. So we have area managers for the Northwest, Northeast, the West or the East, Southeast and London, and currently have a vacant position for the Southwest. Our area managers can be on hand to support with shaping application if you need any advice or guidance, how that might link into wider partnership opportunities, because key to a successful application is how you look at working with local partners. So from a table tennis perspective, either myself or our area manager team can support and guide as you progress with your application, but also if sessions are successful and start, how that plugs into wider network of partners and opportunities, be that clubs, leagues, etc. And Anna, just really quickly on the Parkinson's UK support opportunity.
Yeah, so just how we can help once you're up and running is that we can connect you to our area development managers, who are people that have a bit like what we've just seen with the Table Tennis England managers. They've got an area to cover. They're really hands-on with the groups, as are the network support officers. So these people are really connected with those groups and can help with bringing participants along. We find that trusted voices such as physios and Parkinson's nurses also they have a big say. That trusted voice means that people come along. So what we do is, with the area development managers, network support officers, is that we try and tie those people in, make those people aware that the sessions are happening. So then if people are asking, or when they're with somebody with Parkinson's, they can actually promote the sessions that are happening in the community and say, do you know that this is happening? We can also put them on our lookup tool that's on our website, and that's kind of postcode related, and somebody will put the postcode up wherever you are, then that comes up within their area. So you can do that as well, and that's another way of promoting. So we'll help that. Obviously I will also help as well, so we can really connect you in to help with getting participants along and linking you to that community.
Thanks, Anna. So there's two prongs of approach in terms of support. There's the opportunity around the grant funding to support with the initiation of sessions, but there are more support and opportunities on our website. We've got Being Inclusive page, which houses the Parkinson's review that we've done in the past, so you can understand opportunities we've done in the past. Parkinson's UK website has various resources and opportunities for you to understand how to shape the project and sessions going forward. Any queries in relation to the funding specifically, just come to me, come direct to me. I'm happy to help, email or phone. And as I sort of said, the club webinar page is where this will be hosted after today. So there's plenty of opportunity around support and resource to support as you piece this together. At this point, we've got a couple of minutes left, and I noticed in the chat that there are a couple of questions, and I know that some of you submitted questions on webinar registration point. So I'm just going to pick up one from Sandy Nash, a coach at Edinburgh Table Tennis Club. Sandy asks, adapting the session for beginner players with Parkinson's, is there anything extra to be aware of other than to treat each participant individually? And I'll just quickly put that to Jan, George, or Gary, any of the panel.
Hi Sandy. Yes, so say make sure you do a risk assessment. I find that very important. Get rid of any trip hazards, etc. Make sure you've got rooms and facilities that are warm, because coldness is not good for muscles, certainly not for me. It will send me into spasms. So yeah, you need to make sure you've got a particularly safe area, a clear area, and you also need to make sure that you've got somebody with obviously first aid capabilities or certificates as well, because we will fall over at times, and which can result in injuries. So you do actually need a little bit of information about the capabilities and the steadiness of people, and at what stage they feel, you know, they can move, etc., and what their mobility is like.
Thanks, Jan. Just to pick up another couple of questions and can answer these straight away. So the funding is for Parkinson's UK. We're working with our clubs to support with hosting sessions, but there are a few people and coaches on the call that are perhaps based in Scotland. So you will be eligible for this since it's a Parkinson's UK remit. I noticed that in touch of any physical activity, there's a offer from Amanda on the chat, so opportunity there to reach out. How long after the 10th of March would successful applicants receive money? We've generally turned, and this is the same sort of process around level the table, we generally turn projects around within sort of 2 weeks in terms of administering some funding. It's usually based on the rate in which we can raise invoices and purchase order numbers. So it's a bit of a two-way street in that respect, but usually work within a 2-week parameter following the 10th of March. But as I've sort of said, projects need to have started by the 1st of September, so there is a little bit of buffer with respect to that. Marcus, you talk about you're in the Southwest, who do you contact? In the meantime, you can come directly to me and we can support you through this process of application. That's not a problem at all. Is it best to start monthly sessions? I would suggest that. Go on, Jan.
Facilities you've got, really, I think, Jan, you're sort of purpose built, aren't you? If you're there all the time and you've got the capability and the willingness, I think weekly would be fab. You've got a very targeted audience. It's getting it out there, and it's finding those people and getting them into you. That's the difficulty, because you're a very specific audience you're looking for. So, you know, GP surgeries, physios, all those sort of Parkinson's UK, all of those sort of hospitals, neurology departments. If you can, you know, link in with any of those, they'll have contacts for the people you're looking to access and hopefully can pass on.
Thanks, Jan. And last question, just to cover, can the funding be used to support paying for the coach and new equipment for the session, including marketing costs? Absolutely, that's just a yes. What the funding can't necessarily cover is existing programmes or projects that have already been funded by Table Tennis England, or any capital costs in relation to buildings, energy rates and things of that nature, but certainly can cover coaches' time, facility costs, equipment, marketing, and slightly open to, well, we are open to more innovative ways in which to engage this particular audience in the session as well, and what you deem to be a slightly more innovative way of using them to do that. So yes, absolutely. And the application runs through a series of questions that break it down in terms of what you intend to use the funding for, detail it in there, and we will make decisions off the back of that. Thanks very much. At that point, we at the end of the questions. I'm 2 minutes over, according to my clock, which isn't too bad if anybody knows me from a professional circumstance. So at this point, as I say, the applications will go live tomorrow. I'd urge you to check out the club's webinar page on the Table Tennis England website for the recording and the details of how to apply. The link will be on there. We'll also be publishing a new article, a revised article of what was already on there, with the how to apply link at the bottom of that. So check our website, check the front page, check the club webinars page. You can find that by searching club webinars in the search bar on the web page. or copying that link or that QR code that I sent to you earlier. And any queries in the meantime, then please do reach out, and we wish you all the best with your applications. So I draw the webinar to a close, and I thank you very much for your time, your input. I think it's been really useful for everybody concerned, and that opportunity to chat through you know, some lived experiences I think has proved invaluable. I hope you'll agree.
Good luck, everybody.
All right, thanks.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
You too.